Hey everyone, Cody Hayes here, and I'd like to welcome you to part 3 as we look at the second portion of Christianity, explaining the Great Schism. And we left off with the Nicene Creed, and I mentioned you didn't need to write down the creed, but one of the key things to point out is the passage, "We believe in the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father and the Son." And you may notice that the words "and the Son" are in parentheses. And that's important to keep in mind with continuing on with what is known as the filioque here, the "and" of the Son. Well, while not part of the original Nicene Creed, many of the church fathers, the major theologians and teachers, bishops, presbyters/priests, deacons, lay people too, particularly those in the West, the western side of the church, they began to argue that the Holy Spirit descended from the Father and the Son, which led to the words "and of the Son" being inserted into the Nicene Creed when Western Christians would celebrate the liturgy. I would say that a person who had a strong role in this was St. Augustine of Hippo, the early church father and bishop of Hippo, where, the argument comes from is that in the Gospel of John, Jesus mentions that he's going to send out the Spirit, which proceeds from the Father, but since Jesus has a role in sending the Spirit, therefore the Spirit must also proceed from him as well. And this led to when, Christians, particularly those in the West, would, recite the Nicene Creed as part of the liturgy. They would say the words, "We believe in the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father and the Son." However, the adding of the words "and of the Son," this angered many of the bishops in the East. Why did it do so? Well, simply put, it's not part of the original creed. It's not part of the original creed. Now, the bishops in the West, they responded, and this is still the attitude, of the Catholic Church today, that when we recite the creed in Greek, the Nicene Creed was originally written in Greek, we will not say those words. Well, the response from the Eastern bishops to that was, well, how often do you recite it in Greek to begin with? Well, unless we're talking about a Greek-speaking country, the answer was never. So, the whole notion of, well, when we recite the creed in Greek, we will not say those words is kind of a moot point. So, moving on here, how Constantinople grows in power. Well, around the year 330 CE, Constantine, the Roman emperor, he moves his capital to Byzantium from Rome, which was renamed Constantinople in his honor, and so the Roman Empire is divided into a western and an eastern faction. So, why did Constantine do this? Well, he did this for the sole purpose of preventing a potential rival emperor. because, as mentioned previously, he's the sole emperor of Rome, but at one time he wasn't. So, he did this to prevent, some type of rival emperor, and he had the political capital to be able to do so. So the Roman Empire is divided into a western and an eastern faction. The western side, it fell in 476 CE or AD to essentially barbarian invasion, uh, Germans coming down and essentially, invading and, ultimately, destroying the Western Roman Empire. And as for the East, it made it all the way to 1453 when finally it fell to Muslim Turks. It was called the Byzantium Empire, but it fell to Muslim Turks in the year 1453 CE. Well, because of Constantinople, because it's the emperor's location, its bishop began to grow in power with the influence of the emperor. So, in many respects, this is what can be considered perhaps the beginnings of the term that's known as Caesaropapism, which Caesar in this case refers to, the temporal rulers, however you want to define them. And papism would refer to pope, but in this case it would be relating to bishop. At one time, the title pope was, given to any bishop. It wasn't solely used on the Bishop of Rome, and in fact, it's not completely solely used on the Bishop of Rome. The Bishop of Alexandria is still referred to as the Pope there, but it's where the temporal ruler is essentially getting into church affairs, matters that really should be left to the bishop, or what certainly at this time would have been the main bishop, and that was the Roman bishop. And to give some examples with that, at the Ecumenical Council of Constantinople, the first 381 CE, a decision was made that placed the bishop of Constantinople to be second in power after the bishop of Rome. The original church patriarchy at the end of the first century was Rome at the top, then Alexandria, then Antioch, and then Jerusalem. Well, from this ecumenical council, now that patriarchy of bishops is still Rome at the top, then Constantinople, then Alexandria, then Antioch, and then Jerusalem. Well, then a little bit further in history, at the Ecumenical Council of Chalcedon, 451 CE or AD, an attempt was made to make the Bishop of Constantinople to be equal in power to the Bishop of Rome. Um, at this particular council, the Bishop of Rome, who at the time was Leo the First, the Pope, he was not there. He sent some representatives, and as they're listing off the canons, and you can read the canons of Chalcedon. They're all online. But it was canon number 28, which attempted to make the Bishop of Constantinople to be equal in power to the Bishop of Rome. And the legates that represented Leo the First, the Roman bishop, the Pope, strongly protested this. So when they sent the documents back to Rome, and Leo is essentially reading over them, he sees that one particular canon, he crosses it out, and then he signs off on everything else. And he essentially, sent a letter to the bishop in Constantinople, asking what were you trying to do here, whatnot. And the bishop responded back that it wasn't, him, it was some of the other bishops in the East that were doing this, it wasn't him, that type of thing. So then moving forward, we're now at, the final break, or moving to the final break. But during the beginnings of the second millennium, so now we're in the 1000s, the issue of the filioque, it's once again become a problem for the Eastern and the Western Church. So again, the filioque, the end of the Son, it's not part of the original Nicene Creed, but a number of Christians, particularly in the West, are reciting those words when they, celebrate the liturgy, recite the creed as part of the liturgy. And of course, the Eastern side is like, it's not part of the original creed. And their response is, well, when we recite the creed in Greek, we will not say those words. But since they never do recite it in Greek, unless they happen to be in a Greek-speaking country, that's a moot point. Well, 1054, Leo IX, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, he sends some representatives led by Cardinal Humbert of Mortimer's to go to Constantinople and speak with, its bishop, Michael I, who is commonly referred to as the Patriarch. I sometimes get asked, a bit about, what exactly is a cardinal and all this. Well, the origin of the cardinals were with the bishops that were very, very close to Rome. And then, of course, as the church expanded, a prominent, bishopric was often, elevated to be the role of a cardinal, even though in theory there is no difference between, a bishop who is not a cardinal and a bishop who is a cardinal. But also at one time, you had, you had cardinal priests, you had cardinal deacons, you even had lay cardinals. Now, pretty much, the role of the cardinal, they're considered to be, princes of the church, but it's pretty much only bishops that are considered to be, elevated to the role of a cardinal. And as I mentioned just a few moments ago, in theory, a bishop who is a cardinal has no more authority versus a bishop who is not. But in any case, you have this problem that's, again, becoming an issue. So Leo IX, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, sends Cardinal Humbert of Mortimer's to basically go to Constantinople and to kind of help deal with this issue. Well, what happens next will be the next video, as we will need to stop here, and so we will get into that, and we should finish up this particular portion of Christianity. So take care. I will symbolically see you then.